They say family is everything. But mine? They kept the receipt. It was a Tuesday evening like any other. The familiar creak of the stairs, the scent of leftover pot roast wafting from the kitchen, and the hum of the old ceiling fan reminded me that nothing had changed in this house since I was 16, except, of course, how much I was expected to pay to keep it running. I was home for less than 5 minutes when Mom stopped me by the fridge, holding a folded piece of paper like it was an invoice from God himself. "Claire, honey," she cooed with that sugary voice she used whenever she wanted something. "I need your rent for this month. 800 should do." I blinked. "Rent?" She smiled, all warmth and sweetness, but her eyes didn't waver. "This isn't a hotel, Claire. Everyone contributes." I wanted to argue, to remind her I'd just covered the internet bill, paid for the groceries last week, and replaced the broken microwave. But I could already hear her prepared response, the way she'd tilt her head and sigh like I was overreacting. It wasn't worth it. So I nodded, mumbled something like, "Sure," and headed to my room, biting down the frustration that was beginning to bubble just beneath my skin. Later that night, I found Brandon in the kitchen, lounging at the counter in his faded college hoodie, a spoon halfway to his mouth. He was eating my favorite cereal, the one I'd bought, and didn't even blink when I walked in. "Hey," he said through a mouthful. "Mom said I should focus on finals this week, so I'm off dish duty." I leaned against the doorway. "You mean you're not helping out at all?" He shrugged, unapologetic. "She said I should relax. It's my last semester." Of course she did. I poured myself a glass of water, my thoughts racing. Brandon hadn't held a part-time job since sophomore year. Meanwhile, I'd been working since I was 17. He had no savings, no plan, just a mother who saw him as a budding genius and a father who didn't dare disagree. That night, lying in bed, I opened my banking app and transferred the $800 to Mom's account. It was automatic now, like brushing my teeth or locking the door. I didn't even question it, but something felt off. The next morning, I passed by the dining room table and saw Mom's laptop open, her face aglow from the screen. She didn't notice me at first, too focused on what she was doing. I paused, silently watching from behind. It was a credit card portal. The name on the account wasn't hers. It was Brandon's. I froze. She was paying off his balance, using my money. I stepped back without a word, heart pounding in my chest. My hands trembled slightly, but I curled them into fists. I shouldn't be surprised. Deep down, I wasn't. But something about seeing it with my own eyes, my salary clearing his mess, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. That evening, I sat at the dinner table with them like I always did. Chicken and mashed potatoes. Normal, peaceful. Robert read the newspaper. Brandon scrolled on his phone. Mom passed me the peas like nothing had happened. I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream. But instead, I set down my fork and looked at her. "Is this how it's always going to be?" She looked up with that gentle smile she'd worn for years, the one that made me feel guilty for even thinking she might be wrong. "As long as we're a family," she said softly. "Yes." ChatGPT, John Noi, no kung chila tien hole. It was the assumption that I'd always say yes. The morning sunlight spilled gently through the blinds, casting soft stripes across my bedroom floor. Outside, the chirping birds and warm spring air spoke of renewal, beginnings. Inside, I was wrapping a secondhand game console for Brandon's birthday like it was a peace offering to a spoiled prince. I'd found the old console on a neighborhood app. Barely used, still in the box. $50. It felt thoughtful but not extravagant, just enough to show I remembered without selling a kidney. I even tied a blue ribbon around the box, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he'd appreciate the gesture. As I came downstairs to place the gift on the dining table, Mom appeared behind me, her voice soft and sing-song as always. "You know, Claire, one of the girls in my class told me her older sister gave her a car when she graduated." I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. "A car?" She nodded slowly, her smile unwavering. A used one, of course, but still it shows love. Sacrifice. My fingers tightened around the ribbon. Brandon's not even graduating yet. Well, almost, she replied lightly. And he's been working so hard, hasn't he? Don't you want him to succeed? It was the same song, different verse. She never asked me to give more. She just laid the breadcrumbs and waited for me to pick them up. I bit my tongue, already hearing the next part of the script in my head. Brandon needs a better computer for his future. A car is too much, but surely a PC isn't unreasonable. After all, I could afford it, right? His laptop's so old, Mom added, as if reading my thoughts. And the fan's noisy. Maybe that's why his grades have been slipping. He was averaging a C+. A new PC wasn't going to change that. Still, I nodded. Because that's what I did. It wasn't agreement. It was surrender. Later that afternoon, Naomi FaceTimed me. Her hair was wrapped in a towel, fresh from a shower, but she caught my expression in an instant. "What's going on?" she asked. I hesitated, then flipped the camera to show the open browser tab. A custom-built PC cart, totaling $3,482 after tax. Naomi squinted, then raised an eyebrow so high I thought it might disappear into her hairline. "Claire, tell me you're not going to hit buy now." I shrugged. "He needs it." "No, you need to stop. He's not a kid anymore." "I know, but..." "No buts. Does he even know you're doing this?" "Of course not. Brandon probably assumed his old laptop was fine, until Mom started planting the seed. Now he'd expect something bigger, flashier. And if it didn't come from me, it'd still be my fault for falling short." Naomi sighed. "I get it. You love your family, but love doesn't mean burning yourself to keep them warm." Her words settled in the pit of my stomach like a rock, but they didn't stop me. After we hung up, I stared at the screen for a long time. My cursor hovered over the Confirm Purchase button. I could close the tab. I could call Brandon, tell him what I was planning, see if he even cared. Instead, I reached for my credit card, the one I promised myself I wouldn't touch this year. I typed in the numbers, clicked Submit, and closed my laptop like slamming a door I knew I wouldn't walk back through. That night, while brushing my teeth, I got the email. "Your order has been confirmed. Estimated delivery, March 18th. I stared at the screen, the confirmation glowing in blue. There goes my savings. Again. The day the PC arrived, no one said thank you. But Brandon asked, "Why not the latest model?" The delivery truck rumbled away just as the morning sun spilled across our cracked driveway. I stood there, hands sore from lugging 2 oversized boxes inside. Foam peanuts clung to my clothes like static regret. The excitement I expected, the wide eyes, the thanks, even just a nod, never came. Brandon emerged from the living room in his stained hoodie and mismatched socks, glanced at the tower and monitor on the floor, and shrugged. "Why not the latest model?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He didn't even look up. "It's just, this one's like last year's release, right? It's fine, I guess." I stared at him, words catching like splinters in my throat. He walked past me to grab a soda from the fridge, humming like it was any other Saturday. Like I hadn't just spent more than a month's rent on something I'd convinced myself was a gesture of love. He never asked me to, but he also never refused to benefit. After dragging everything upstairs to his room, I opened each box, unwrapped cables, clipped plastic seals, and readjusted the airflow panels. Brandon sat on his bed, scrolling his phone, muttering occasionally about specs. I asked him to hand me a screwdriver. He tossed it in my direction without looking. It landed with a dull clank beside my ankle. 3 hours later, the system booted. The screen lit up with a soft blue glow. Clean, sharp, pristine. I called him over. "Try it out," I said. He slid into the chair, clicked around a bit, nodded once, then resumed texting. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. Downstairs, Mom was frosting a cake like it was a national holiday. She didn't even ask how the build had gone, just smiled and said, Does your brother like it? I looked at her, the spatula in her hand, the hopeful tilt of her head. I thought about saying something, about how Brandon barely acknowledged it, how my credit card was crying, how I was exhausted and numb. But the words dissolved before they reached my lips. So I nodded, silent again. That evening, dinner was meatloaf and passive aggression. Brandon scarfed down 3 servings without saying a word. Dad set his fork down and glanced toward the stairs. You did good, Claire, he said casually. But your brother deserves more. It hit like a slap wrapped in cotton. More? I echoed, half laughing. He hasn't even said thanks. Dad frowned, sipping his iced tea. He's under pressure. Finals, job hunting. You wouldn't understand. I bit down so hard on my tongue I tasted iron. The rest of dinner blurred. Plates scraped, chairs creaked. The television murmured in the background. I was there, but not really there. My body sat, ate, nodded when required. But my mind had already retreated upstairs where my laptop waited. That night, I opened a blank document and stared at the blinking cursor. Then I typed, I'm not a bad daughter, but maybe they're bad parents. I didn't even read it twice before hitting save. Then, slowly, deliberately, I picked up my phone, opened the app that controlled Brandon's new PC remotely, and tapped delete. A warning popped up. Are you sure you want to remove this device? I hovered, then tapped yes. It vanished from the list. A beat passed. Then I opened the App Store and reinstalled it. They planned a party. I planned a withdrawal. Balloons, banners, and buffet menus. They had it all under control. Linda paced through the living room, holding a printed schedule and talking into her phone like she was managing a presidential inauguration. Professor Hamilton is confirmed. Oh, and the Carsons from the PTA. Yes, they'll be here too. She beamed, turning to me. It's going to be the event of the year. I was curled on the arm of the sofa, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the circus unfold. Brandon strolled in moments later, yawning, still in his pajamas. He grunted something that sounded like approval and tossed his phone on the table. Screen lit up with texts from girls and classmates congratulating him on making it. Linda turned to me again. Oh, Claire, don't forget to pick up the catering trays this Friday. I blinked. I'm working Friday. She waved it off. I told your boss you'd be late. This is a family event. Of course she did, because my time was hers to schedule. I looked up. Who's paying for this again? She laughed. I am. Who else? The lie was so casual it almost felt like a joke. Yeah, right, I murmured, smiling faintly. As usual? She didn't catch the tone, or maybe she chose not to. The sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns on the floor, a poetic contrast to the slow burn inside my chest. I retreated to my room. As the door clicked shut behind me, I opened my laptop and stared at Brandon's PC ID glowing in the admin panel. Still synced. Still mine to command. I moved quickly. First, I created a new email account, one Brandon couldn't trace. Then I transferred the admin rights from my personal account to the burner. The interface blinked once, confirming the shift. I felt no thrill, just clarity. Then I opened the controls. Set remote lock timer? It asked. I clicked yes and selected 72 hours. A quiet hum rose in my ears. Not from the fan, not from my laptop, but from a storm building quietly inside me. That evening, Naomi called. Her voice, as always, was calm but edged with disbelief. Wait. You really transferred admin rights? You're serious about this? I'm not pulling the plug, I said. Not yet. There was a pause. Claire, you sure about this? I looked out the window. Linda was in the yard now, fussing with tablecloth colors. Brandon lounged in a lawn chair, sunglasses on, barking into his phone about party themes and vibe consistency. I typed out my reply slowly. It's not revenge, it's closure. And I meant it. Not a tantrum. Not a show. Just the beginning of letting go. 3 days. That was all. He blew out the candles. I blew up the illusion. Applause erupted as Brandon leaned over the cake, a smug grin on his face, and puffed out his cheeks for the final blow. The candles flickered once, then died under his breath. Phones clicked. Linda clapped like a pageant mom. The crowd, mostly professors, PTA acquaintances, and Linda's garden club, cheered with polite enthusiasm. "Congratulations, sweetheart." Linda beamed, adjusting Brandon's collar like he was still 8. The restaurant glowed under soft amber lights, the kind that made everyone look kinder than they were. Tables were decorated with small golden frames of Brandon's childhood photos, glossy and carefully placed. One showed him with chocolate smeared on his face at age 4. Another was his awkward prom shot, arm slung over a girl who didn't last past junior year. I sat quietly in the corner next to Naomi. She was recording on her phone, pretending to capture the moment for posterity. But I knew her better. Her camera wasn't just collecting memories, it was collecting proof. Linda called for attention. "Now, before we move on to dessert, my daughter Claire has a little surprise for the guest of honor." Heads turned. Some smiled, some whispered. I stood, smoothing my navy blue dress and picking up the box from the chair beside me. It was neatly wrapped, but I had made sure the tape would peel off without effort. I walked toward Brandon, heels clicking on the tile like a metronome ticking down. He raised an eyebrow, arms crossed. "Didn't think you'd top the PC?" He smirked. I handed him the box. "Thank you," I said softly. He blinked. "For what?" "For all you didn't notice." That silenced him. For a moment. Laughter rippled through the guests, those who assumed it was a witty toast. Brandon tore off the wrapping and opened the lid. Inside was the PC's original startup disk, nestled in tissue paper. He frowned, reached for the power button on the laptop already sitting on the restaurant's tech table, where he'd proudly displayed it earlier during a slideshow of his academic journey. The screen lit up. System locked. Return to sender. A few people chuckled, unsure whether this was a prank or a clever gift. But the laughter faltered when the screen stayed frozen. Brandon's mouth twitched. "What the hell?" he muttered, tapping keys. Nothing. Linda moved toward him, still smiling. "What's going on?" I turned to her. "That," I said, "is the last dollar you'll ever see from me." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I walked past her, past the stunned crowd, and toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Robert rise, his voice unusually loud. "Claire, wait." I stopped, hand on the door. "Number, I'm done waiting." The silence that followed was thicker than the frosting on Brandon's cake. Getting kicked out felt less like exile, and more like release. The air in the new apartment was still. Not quiet. Just still, like a held breath. A single fan buzzed lazily from the ceiling, stirring the scent of new paint and cheap pine flooring. Claire stood in the center of the room with a cardboard box in one hand and her phone in the other. No framed pictures, no floral curtains, no passive-aggressive post-it notes on the fridge. Just silence. And her. Naomi was balancing a rice cooker on one hip and a tote bag in the other. "You need a couch." "I need furniture," Claire said, setting the box down near the wall. They both laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was relief. The studio was barely 400 square feet. A kitchenette with 2 cabinets, a bathroom with a door that didn't quite shut all the way, and a window that overlooked the back of a nail salon. But for Claire, it was the first thing in her adult life she had chosen without permission. Her phone buzzed. "Linda, Mom. You've made your choice. Don't come crying back when you realize how ungrateful you've been." She didn't reply. Instead, she opened her banking app and tapped through the menus. The joint card she had with her mother, technically opened when she was 17 just to build credit, was still active. Claire swiped to close it. The app asked, "Are you sure?" She tapped yes, twice. Then she moved on. Email, new password. Apple ID, Logged out all devices, streaming accounts changed, even the family Amazon Prime. She deauthorized every shared login. No more order placed by Linda receipts at 2 a.m. Naomi peeked over her shoulder. "You're going full witness protection, huh?" Claire offered a half smile. "It's not protection. It's prevention." Naomi pulled out 2 paper cups of iced coffee from her bag and handed one over. "You deserve peace, Claire." Claire took the coffee, then sat cross-legged on the floor. Her laptop hummed as it powered on. "I didn't tell you before," Naomi said, settling beside her. "But 2 years ago, your mom borrowed your credit card." Claire looked up. Naomi nodded. "Remember that time Brandon miraculously paid off his car repair bill in one go?" "Yeah, that was you." Claire felt her jaw tighten, the sting of betrayal, old and new, fusing together. "How did you know?" "I was there. I saw the receipt in your mom's bag. Your name was on it." Claire stared at the laptop screen. A blank document glared back, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. She clicked compose new email. To Linda subject, account usage body. Any spending from my account will have to be approved. And I don't approve anymore. She clicked send. The feeling wasn't triumph. It was stillness. The kind that follows a hurricane when everything is broken but finally quiet. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a single message from her father. "Robert. Ungrateful." Claire stared at it. Then she placed the phone face down on the floor, leaned back against the wall, and exhaled. Not in anger, not in grief, but in something closer to rebirth. Freedom is quiet, but so is loneliness. By mid-June, Claire had settled into a rhythm that felt eerily smooth. Wake, dress, work, home, repeat. Her studio was tidy, almost sterile, with the bed always made and the dishes always done. There were no voices behind walls, no footsteps at midnight, no laughter that stung. But the silence pressed in like fog, soft, constant, and oddly suffocating. The first few nights were the hardest. She caught herself glancing at her phone, waiting for messages she no longer wanted. She stared at the kitchen table and half expected Linda to appear with a long list of needs masked as motherly advice. But the chair stayed empty, and Claire stayed alone. On a slow Saturday morning, she ducked into a cafe downtown, half to escape the walls of her apartment, half for the illusion of company. She ordered a cappuccino and scanned the room for a seat. That's when she saw her. Emily Tran. They hadn't spoken in years. Not since high school, when Claire vaguely remembered Emily coming over for group projects, her arms always wrapped tightly around a worn notebook. Claire approached cautiously. "Emily?" Emily looked up and blinked, surprised. Then she smiled. Genuine, if hesitant. "Claire, wow, it's been forever." They sat, coffee between them, old classmates awkwardly trying to bridge a decade of distance. Claire mentioned moving out, vaguely gesturing at family stuff. Emily hesitated, then leaned in. "You know Brandon got that scholarship I applied for?" Claire blinked. "He said it was merit-based." Emily's lips curled into something bitter. "My mom got a call from yours. Said if I didn't withdraw gracefully, she'd make things hard. Next day, I was off the list." Claire stared at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily shrugged. "You were always so loyal to them. I figured you'd just defend him." Claire couldn't speak. Something cold and heavy settled in her chest. It wasn't just her. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't overreacting. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She let it ring. Then another call. Then a voicemail. Later, walking home, she finally listened. Linda's voice poured into her ear, syrupy and slow, like a hymn from a forgotten church. "No matter where you go, Claire, you'll always be one of us. Blood doesn't forget. Family doesn't break. You'll come home. You always do." Claire sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Her fingers moved on muscle memory. She opened her recorder app and hit Save Voicemail. Then she scrolled back, selected every call, every message from Linda, from Brandon, even the vague, emoji-filled ones that meant nothing on the surface but felt like hooks beneath. Save all. Naomi visited that evening with Thai takeout, and the kind of sarcasm only best friends could get away with. "You okay?" she asked, unpacking noodles. Claire nodded. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Lying doesn't suit you." Claire sighed. "I saw Emily today. Turns out Brandon's win was my loss. Again." Naomi didn't look surprised, just quietly angry. "They're not done," she said finally, sliding a spring roll across the table. "Brace yourself." Claire looked out the window, where the streetlights flickered. The piece she'd carved for herself was real, but fragile. And somewhere in the shadows, the storm was circling back. When they reached out, it wasn't for me. It was for my money. The invitation came in the form of a cheerful voicemail. Brandon's voice, softer than she remembered, played through her earbuds as she walked home from work. "Hey, Claire. Been thinking about you a lot. Mom and Dad want to get dinner this weekend. Just us. Let's talk. I miss you." Claire didn't reply. Not immediately. She played it 3 times. She even let it ring out in the empty studio, just to hear what her silence sounded like against his carefully constructed sweetness. Still, part of her wanted to believe. By Saturday, she'd decided. If they wanted a meeting, she'd give them one. But she'd bring her armor. The restaurant was upscale, nestled in a quiet part of East Sacramento. Soft lighting, linen tablecloths, and that familiar tone in Linda's voice the moment Claire walked in. Eager, rehearsed. "Sweetheart, you look beautiful," Linda said, reaching for a hug that Claire politely half returned. Robert gave a nod. Brandon grinned like a man who'd rehearsed the expression in the mirror. They ordered quickly, small talk layered over appetizers. Brandon asked about her work. Vaguely, like someone trying to sound interested without really listening. Linda complimented Claire's outfit, then brought up family photos she wanted to update. Then the real reason surfaced, of course, over the entree. "So," Brandon said, twirling his fork with faux casual ease, "I've been working on this project idea. A cafe/co-working space. You know? Trendy, minimal, eco-friendly. I've even got a concept name. Grounds and Goals." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Catchy." Linda leaned in, smiled tight. "He's so passionate, Claire. You should see his vision board. We think it's the perfect way for him to settle into something real, something stable." Robert sipped his wine and said nothing. Claire took a slow breath, let it sit in her chest like smoke. "So you're opening a business?" "Well," Brandon drawled, "it's still in the concept phase. I mean, there's this little funding hiccup." Linda patted his hand. "We were thinking maybe you could help. Just a small loan. 30,000. We'd pay you back." "Of course." Claire didn't flinch. She set down her knife and looked at Linda. "Of course," she said, voice smooth. "But does Mom have a mortgage?" The table froze. Robert blinked. Brandon shifted in his seat. Linda's smile faltered. I don't see what that has to do with—" Claire turned to her father, gaze steady. "Dad, you always taught me that money should be backed by something real. That responsibility has to come with leverage. I'm just applying your lesson." Robert cleared his throat. Linda's jaw tightened. Brandon muttered, "It's just family, Claire." Claire smiled thinly. "Exactly." The silence stretched long enough for the waiter to awkwardly ask if anyone wanted dessert. No one answered. Then Linda leaned forward, her voice syrupy and sharp all at once. "If you really loved us, you wouldn't ask for collateral." Claire didn't blink. She just folded her napkin and placed it on the table. She didn't walk away yet. But they knew. The old rules didn't apply anymore. The silence after my offer was louder than any slap. It had been 3 days since the dinner. 3 days since Claire set the rules. No ultimatums, no shouting. Just one simple, polite condition: a mortgage. If they wanted her money, they could put something of their own on the line. She expected a conversation, maybe negotiation. What she got was quiet. Then came the email. From Linda, subject line: "Let's be reasonable. Claire, your father isn't comfortable putting the house up as collateral. You're being too demanding. This is your brother. This is family. I raised you to be giving, not calculating." Claire sat at her desk, sipping black coffee, rereading the message with no emotion. The bitterness in the cup felt more honest than anything in her inbox. She opened a new draft. Then there's no loan. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no justifications. She hit send. The phone rang 30 minutes later. Robert's number. She didn't answer. She didn't need to hear what silence would sound like from his end. It wasn't him calling as a father. It was damage control. He didn't want to talk. He wanted her to fold. Later that evening, her phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Brandon. "Unbelievable. You always think you're better than us. If the money isn't coming, don't bother showing up again." There was no pretense anymore. No apology, no attempt at softening the edges. Just entitlement and anger. Claire stared at the screen. For a moment, her fingers hovered. Should she reply? Should she explain? Should she remind him of all the things she'd paid for over the years? The rent, the textbooks, the therapy he never went to but insisted he needed the copay for? She didn't. Instead, she opened her notes app and wrote, June 14th, 2023. Brandon cut me off. Not for lack of love, but for lack of money. She scrolled through her contact list. One by one, she blocked their numbers. Linda, Robert, Brandon. Then she moved to her email. Filters, auto archive. Anything from those addresses would go straight to the digital void. Out of sight. Out of life. Her phone buzzed one more time. A final message from Linda. It's not too late to be part of this family. Just remember who we are. Claire didn't even read it twice. She opened her phone's settings, selected Erase Chat History, and deleted the conversation. Then she opened her journal. They think I'm cruel. They think I've changed. But the truth is, I just stopped funding the illusion. I didn't walk away from them. I just stopped offering myself up like a credit line they never intended to repay. She smiled. And just like that, they cut themselves off. ChatGPT Jan Noi. Toi Kong Jot Kao Noi. I just stopped painting over the rot. Late October arrived with the kind of chill Claire liked. Sharp enough to clear the air, but not cruel. She stepped out of her new apartment complex, paperwork folder tucked under her arm, and breathed in the freedom she had signed for. A full-year lease. Utilities in her name. The last of her financial ties to the house on Elkhorn Boulevard had been clipped. Inside her folder sat more than a lease. It held the address update forms for every piece of her life. Her driver's license, her voter registration, her work HR profile. She had spent the entire morning clicking edit, typing the new zip code with care, and pressing save. A quiet declaration of sovereignty. Naomi met her for coffee that afternoon, plopping down across from her with a triumphant smile. "You look different," she said. Claire smirked. "Does freedom show up in my skin tone?" "No," Naomi said, stirring her chai. "But peace does." They talked about work, about new apartment smells, about the curtain rods Claire finally figured out. Naomi brought up a podcast she'd started listening to. A show where women talked about toxic families and how they got out. "You should go on," Naomi said. "Seriously, your story? It's raw. People would feel seen." Claire shook her head gently. "I didn't do it to inspire anyone. I did it because I couldn't breathe anymore." Naomi leaned back, nodding. She didn't push. That night, Claire curled up on her sofa, the light from her laptop washing the ceiling in a soft glow. She was halfway through reviewing next quarter's work reports when her phone lit up with a name she hadn't seen in months: Aunt Diane. She let it ring twice. Then curiosity won. "Claire, honey." Diane's voice crackled faintly. "I won't keep you, but there's something you need to know." Claire's heart didn't race. Not anymore. She listened. "It's Brandon," Diane said. "That cafe he was going to open, it flopped. They didn't do the licensing right. And the bank is looking into the house. Your mom she might have signed something she shouldn't have." Claire closed her laptop slowly. "You're telling me they might lose the house?" A pause. "I don't know all the details, but it's bad. I just thought, well, maybe you should know." She didn't thank her aunt. Not out of rudeness, but because there was nothing left to say. They talked for another minute. Diane's voice soft, guilt-ridden. But Claire's mind was already drifting elsewhere. When the call ended, she stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet street below. Porch lights blinked on. A man walked his dog past her building. Somewhere, a baby cried. Claire didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel pity. There was no surge of satisfaction, no ache of guilt, just stillness. And I didn't feel a thing. I thought Mom wanted to apologize, but it turns out she was just looking for a way to charge. The message came on a Wednesday morning, just as Claire was about to unplug from work. "Let's catch up. Just coffee, just family. Love, Mom." No apologies, no explanations, just sugar-slicked words that no longer had weight. Claire didn't answer for 2 days. Then, with a curiosity that felt more clinical than emotional, she replied, "Saturday. Noon, brew and bean, downtown." She arrived early, chose the seat against the wall, facing the entrance. Neutral, like the lighting in the cafe. When the door opened at 11:59, Linda entered first, all pastel blouse and gentle smiles. Robert followed, stone-faced, carrying a kind of stiffness that didn't bend even when he sat. Brandon trailed behind, neatly dressed, calm. Claire noted the difference, but didn't trust it. "Claire," Linda said, voice warm as foam. "You look good." Claire offered a nod. "So do you." No one ordered drinks. They began with weather, then moved to work. Then memories from years ago, when Claire and Brandon were still kids and the world had fewer lines between them. Claire let it roll. Then Linda placed her hands together like she was praying. "We're glad you're doing well. Really, and Brandon has a new plan. Something promising." Claire looked at her brother. He sat straighter. "I've been working on a real concept," Brandon said. "Not just a cafe, a brand. Local, sustainable, rotating artists featured monthly, merchandise." Claire didn't blink. "We just need a little help to get off the ground," Linda chimed in. 30,000. A loan, of course. We'll pay it back. We're family." There it was. The reason for the invitation. The reason her mother's nails were freshly manicured. The reason Brandon rehearsed his lines like a startup pitch. Claire inhaled through her nose and exhaled through her smile. "I agree," she said softly. "We are family." Linda relaxed. Robert leaned in slightly. "And because we're family," Claire continued, reaching into her tote bag, "I know you'll understand the need for boundaries." She placed a slim folder on the table. Inside, 2 printed documents. "A formal loan agreement," she said, tapping the first page. "And this," she flipped the second page over, "is the mortgage form. The house goes up as collateral. 30,000, 3 years, 2% interest." The cafe hummed around them. A cappuccino hissed in the background. But at their table, time paused. Linda's face blanched like old porcelain. Robert stiffened further. Brandon swallowed, the words caught in his throat. Claire didn't rush. "You said it yourselves. This is business, a promising venture, and responsible entrepreneurs secure their capital properly." No one spoke. Claire folded her hands in her lap, posture easy, breath even. "I'm happy to help, but not blindly. Not again." She leaned forward, voice still warm. The current house will be the collateral. A family is a place where no paperwork is needed, unless the only person with money has been evicted. The folder stayed on the table like a loaded gun. No one reached for it. Linda blinked, her lips parting but no words coming. Brandon leaned back, jaw tight. Robert stared at the documents, unmoving, like reading them would acknowledge something he didn't want to believe. Finally, Linda spoke. Claire, we're not a bank. We don't do contracts and legal nonsense between blood. Claire tilted her head. Neither do I. Not usually. But blood, Mom, is what you all used to bind me when it suited you. I'm just clarifying terms now. Linda's tone sharpened. It's so petty. You'd let your brother's dreams rot just to play accountant? Robert shifted in his seat. You want to risk this house, Claire? If your brother's business doesn't work out, what happens then? Do you want to see your childhood home sold off over a coffee shop? Claire met his eyes, steady and cold. When you used my savings for his tuition, without asking, did you ask what would happen to me? When you kicked me out for saying no, did you worry about where I'd sleep? When Mom used my card to clear his debt, who was calculating then? Brandon slammed his palm on the table, silverware rattling. It's always about you, isn't it? You think just because you make more money now, you get to look down on everyone? Claire turned to him, voice low and razor sharp. I don't look down. I look back. And I finally see things for what they were. Linda's face twisted. You've changed. No, Claire replied. I stopped lying to myself. That's different. Robert's voice came next, low but full of heat. I don't have a child like you. Silence swallowed the space. Claire looked at him for a long second. Then, slowly, she rose from her chair, collected the folder, tucked it back into her tote bag. I've heard that sentence, she said softly, so often that it's no longer sad. She smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just final. Brandon opened his mouth again, but she was already turning toward the door. This time there was no hesitation in her steps, only clarity. And not one of them followed. Cutting off is not just an action, it's a release. And release doesn't need to be acknowledged. Claire folded the last of her sweaters into the drawer, fingers brushing against soft fabric that once smelled faintly of the old house. Now it carried lavender from the sachet Naomi had tucked into her moving box. This wasn't just a new place, it was a clearing of emotional cobwebs. Her apartment was small, studio-sized, one narrow window. But the silence didn't press on her like before. It breathed with her. A Friday evening came quietly. Naomi knocked twice, then entered with pizza, 2 sodas, and a bag of gummy bears. Official housewarming, Naomi announced, flopping down on the floor and handing Claire a paper plate. Claire smiled. Not the polite, tired smile she'd once worn like armor. This one touched her eyes. You know, I thought I'd feel empty, but this feels like exhaling. You finally stopped carrying them, Naomi said. You didn't just put down the bags. They never should have been yours to hold. They sat in silence, watching old sitcom reruns, the flickering screen reflecting on Claire's bare walls. There was no framed photo of childhood, no graduation shot with Brandon, no holiday pictures with matching sweaters. And yet, for once, she didn't feel the need to fill the space. Weeks passed. Claire woke up earlier now, not out of anxiety, but by choice. She jogged around the block, earbuds tucked in, playlists full of songs she never got to play out loud before. She signed up for an online course in UX design. Her manager noticed the effort, and by mid-month, she got her first official raise. She took herself out to lunch. And as she sat alone at a sunny outdoor table, biting into a grilled cheese sandwich with tomato soup on the side, Claire pulled out her phone. She clicked open her social media apps. She unfollowed them all. Not with anger, not with bitterness. Just an exhale. A digital reflection of a decision already made in her bones. Your family may not have changed, Naomi said a few nights later during another one of their casual hangouts. But you have. Claire nodded. Yeah, I stopped asking to be understood. That's where it shifted. They clinked soda cans. One Saturday, while picking up paper towels and oat milk at the supermarket, Claire turned a corner near the frozen aisle and stopped. Aunt Diane stood a few feet away, holding a bag of peas. Her expression flickered. Surprise, recognition, something else. Claire nodded a polite hello, ready to move on. But Diane didn't nod back. She stepped closer, eyes suddenly solemn, unreadable. Claire, there's something I think you should know about Brandon. Claire froze, hand still gripping the cart, and the peace in her chest stirred, for the first time in months. I'm not looking for revenge. But the truth has a way of finding the right person. Claire tightened her grip on the shopping cart, the cold, fluorescent lights of the supermarket casting long shadows down the aisle. The moment Aunt Diane said Brandon's name, the hum of background music and clattering carts seemed to mute themselves. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Not yet. Diane, looking older than Claire remembered, wasn't smiling. She didn't have the smug tilt of Linda's head, nor the quiet judgment of Robert. She simply looked tired. Can we talk? Just a few minutes? Diane asked gently. Claire nodded and followed her to the coffee counter near the checkout. They sat side by side, steaming cups between them. The noise returned. Beeps, chatter, a child whining for candy. But it felt far away. Diane stirred her cup slowly. You probably guessed things didn't go well after you stepped away. Claire didn't reply. She waited. The coffee shop, Diane began. Brandon opened it in mid-June. Your mom pulled every favor she could. Got someone to co-sign a loan after the house didn't qualify. They poured money into renovations, hired staff. Brandon wanted to make it flashy. Grand opening was decent. But by the third month, he couldn't even pay for supplies. Claire breathed in through her nose. Calm. Detached. Still. Diane continued. They tried to cover the losses with another short-term loan. Interest rates were ugly. In the end, they sold the place for pennies on the dollar. Claire looked down into her cup. So they lost the shop. And the house, Diane added quietly. Sold last month. They've moved to an apartment near the freeway. Not a great area. A silence hung between them, heavy and oddly clean. Claire didn't feel a rush of triumph. No justice anthem played in her head. It was just a fact, a ripple, a confirmation of something she'd long accepted. Diane looked sideways at her. Aren't you sad? Claire thought for a long moment. Then, voice low but steady, she answered, I'm not happy, but I'm not sad either. I'm just not there anymore. That was the truth, the only truth that mattered. Her family had built their tower on borrowed bricks and expectations, and now it crumbled. But Claire hadn't pushed. She'd simply stepped away and watched gravity do what it always does. Diane nodded slowly. I figured as much. She hesitated, fingers tapping her paper cup. They've been asking about you. Not constantly, but enough. If they ask again, what should I say? Claire looked up, her eyes clearer than they'd been in years. Tell them I'm fine, and not coming back. Diane gave a small nod, and the air around them seemed to release its tension. No bitterness, no performance. Just a line finally drawn in ink, not pencil. As they stood, Claire placed her hand lightly on Diane's arm. Thank you for telling me. Diane smiled faintly. You deserve to know. Claire watched her walk away, then returned to her cart. She still had oat milk and bread to pick up. The shelves stretched in front of her. Colorful, ordinary, untouched by the chaos of blood ties. And for the first time in her life, Claire felt the final knot loosen from around her chest. There are things that cannot be paid for with money, but make people lose everything because they try to buy them. The kettle whistled softly in Claire's quiet apartment, the steam curling into the air like a final sigh. She poured the hot water into her French press, the scent of dark roast wrapping around her like a familiar shawl. Morning sunlight pushed through the thin curtains, casting warm stripes across the hardwood floor. Her desk was tidy, her planner open, her inbox filled with manageable tasks and respectful clients. It was her birthday, but not a day of fanfare. No balloons, no forced smiles, just peace. Her phone buzzed on the counter. One new message, Mom. Claire didn't move at first. She stared at the screen. For a moment, she let her mind stretch back. Not with longing, but with clarity. To the birthdays where she paid for her own cake, where Brandon got presents and she got obligations. To the forced smiles, the unspoken deals, the silent erasures. Then, she opened the message. Happy birthday. No punctuation, no name, no warmth. Just 2 words, dry as a bank receipt. She let the message sit for a moment. No anger rose, no tears. She wasn't surprised, only reminded of how far she had come. She pressed delete, placed the phone screen down, and turned back to her coffee. No reply, no wait. Claire slipped on her hiking boots and grabbed her small backpack. Naomi would be waiting at the base of the trail. They had agreed weeks ago to climb together that day. No candles, no gifts, just altitude and honesty. A ritual, Naomi had joked, to mark the year Claire finally climbed out of her old life. The trail was quiet this early. Pines lined the path, their shadows long and sleepy. Claire felt her breath fall into rhythm with her steps. Naomi walked beside her, saying little. That was their style. No need to fill the air. Their silence wasn't empty. It was full of presence. At one switchback, Naomi glanced over. You okay? Claire smiled faintly. Yeah, just thinking. About them? Claire shook her head. Number about me. The last leg was steep, but they pushed on, the sky opening wider with every step. When they reached the summit, the view stretched endlessly. Rolling hills, flickers of golden trees, the tiny winding threads of distant roads. Claire stood still, hands on her hips, breathing in the wind. Naomi lowered herself onto a rock, sipping water. Claire joined her. After a long pause, Claire spoke, more to the sky than to her friend. I don't need to take revenge on them, she said. I just don't need to come back. Naomi nodded. That's more powerful than anything. They stayed until the sun leaned west, casting soft gold across their skin. No one else came. It was their moment. Claire didn't take a photo. That evening, back in her apartment, the lights were soft. The world was quiet. Claire placed her boots neatly by the door, kicked off her jacket, and sat down at her desk. Her computer had restarted during the day. Now it glowed with a single message on the screen. Update complete. Welcome back, Claire. She leaned back, a small smile playing on her lips. The reflection on the screen caught her eyes. Brighter now, clearer. Not looking back, not looking for approval. Just home. Hello, myself, she whispered. Then she clicked to begin her work. Her day, her life, her way. Some endings don't come with fireworks. They come with silence. Still and certain. Claire didn't scream, didn't slam doors, and never tried to prove she was right. But through every quiet refusal, every boundary drawn in ink instead of pleading, she reclaimed something far more valuable than approval. Her dignity. Her family lost more than a house. They lost the only person who ever held them together, and they didn't even notice until she stopped holding on. This wasn't a tale of revenge in the traditional sense. No one was dragged into court, and no one begged for forgiveness on their knees. Yet justice arrived. Slow, subtle, and irreversible. Because sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment. It looks like liberation. And in that liberation, the balance of power silently shifts. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late. But once it's heard, it echoes with impossible clarity. Claire's story is a reminder that love without respect is a debt never worth collecting. That being the good child should never mean being the sacrificial one. And that silence is only golden when freely chosen, not when forced upon you by obligation. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story resonated with you, like, share, and subscribe to support more powerful narratives like Claire's. Comment 1, if you've ever felt the weight of quiet betrayal. Comment 2, if you believe justice should have gone further. Let us know your thoughts below, because your voice matters.